Welcome to Investing in Intelligence, where we talk about artificial intelligence companies, stocks, and trading. I'm James, here with my co host Kai, and today we will be talking about ARM. I want to remind you that the opinions expressed on this show are just that, opinions. They should not be taken as specific advice to invest in a particular way. So, looks like we're on a Monday and we've got no open trading. So, we're talking in the middle of a Monday here and no stock market going on. So is that a nice thing for you this week, Kai? Not have to worry about your investments on a Monday?
No, the rest of the world is actually trading today. Isn't that right, James? I mean, Memorial Day is not a worldwide holiday. It's strictly with the United States. So you could get on sort of the world markets and see how the world is trading. That's actually something that I recommend doing on a
And
Monday.
crypto. And crypto also.
Crypto never stops. Crypto is like New York City. Crypto never sleeps, James. It never sleeps on the world. A lot of crypto in the news.
Did you know there were some proposals recently to actually allow 24-hour stock trading? So there's a certain company that wants to start it up with their own exchange, from what I understand, allow people to trade shares 24/7. And then there was some kind of proposal open for public comment about whether or not the main exchanges should go 24/7. So I'm not sure if you heard about that or not.
I did. I am not a proponent of that, but I'm selfishly not a proponent of that because I like to shut my brain off. I like to take a break, especially those that have multi lines of work or do this as sort of a side job. I like to trade during the trading hours. It's more difficult for me to be like, oh, I need to watch what the market's doing at 10 o'clock at night every day of the week. The amount of information what about you? What are your thoughts on that?
I agree.
Okay. All right. James, a man of many languages, but not a man of many words in regards to his opinion regarding 24-hour trading. So let's get into ARM, James. ARM is a company. We talked about ASML last week. I don't think we've ever done a show on NVIDIA. We really should. I was also really excited to talk about this one. But ARM is everywhere, similar to crypto right now. But give the listener, those tuning in to our show, what ARM is, and just a basic rundown of what ARM is.
Absolutely. So ARM designs chips. So last time we talked about ASML, which makes the machines to make chips. ARM makes the design or the blueprint for the chips, then gives that design to TSMC. TSMC uses the machines from ASML to actually make the chips. And then companies like Apple and NVIDIA take those chips and make GPUs and computers and things like that. So yeah, ARM makes the blueprints. Now, 99% of smartphone chips use ARM designs. ARM designs are optimized for battery powered devices. So the other big competing design is from Intel. They call it x87, not as optimized for power efficiency. So an ARM chip can do 4 times the compute with the same amount of power. So much more efficient. Now, other than Intel, there is one other competitor for designs, for chip designs, and that's going to be what's called RISC-V or RISC-V, but it's more of an open source type of thing. They don't offer the same support, and they're just not as good as ARM designs. So yeah, so ARM is a dominant player in chip design. It could take decades for a competitor to actually chip away at their moat, just like ASML. And yeah, Apple's used ARM for 20 years in their phones, and they recently switched from Intel to ARM for their computers too. And ARM was picking up a lot of share in data centers. So I would say that's the overview. Founded in 1990 by Apple Computer and a couple other companies, been trucking away ever since then. So that's the overview of ARM.
The chips that are utilized in the MacBook Air or MacBook or the phones are designed by ARM. And so what they design these chips, and then they sell the designs, and then they license the designs, so they make money off of the licensing of these designs. Is that how that works?
Two ways. So they design the chips and they allow companies to just make the chip that they designed. Alternatively, a company can kind of buy the design and then license that to other companies. So 60% of their revenue is from royalties, direct royalties, and then 40% is from licensing. Just to give you an idea of kind of like how this breaks down. So there's 16 to 20 CPUs in a phone. Like let's say an iPhone Pro that costs you $1,500 or $1,600. There's 16 to 20 CPUs in that phone, and they could potentially all be designed by ARM. So if a $1,600 smartphone has $100 of ARM content in that smartphone, then ARM would make $4 on each phone sold. If they're taking a 4% royalty, they're going to make $4 on each phone sold. Now, they used to have really low royalties, like 1% or 1.5%. And now all of a sudden they're making like 4 to 5% royalties on their newer chips. So drastic increase. And it looks like they're headed towards 6% for their royalties. By the way, still making royalty revenue from chips designed between 1990 and 2012. Still making a lot of money from older chips that they designed. So they're doing pretty well. Now they do have to spend a lot of money on R&D, like 30 to 40% of their overall revenue goes towards R&D because obviously they're a design company. They have to have money going into R&D. But still they're growing revenue at 17% per year. So doing pretty well.
I'm actually shocked that the revenue numbers weren't higher, being that sort of the market is 99% of phones and the majority of computers use these chip designs. To give you some comparison, and one of the things I did, so chips versus GPUs, my understanding is NVIDIA really designs these GPUs, and most of these GPUs are utilized in the build out of AI. But the revenue growth is quite different. I mean, not growth, but the revenue in general. I mean, I think it's about $3 billion for ARM, but like $30 billion for NVIDIA. So why does a company like ARM not have the revenue that a company like NVIDIA has if essentially 99% of phones are utilizing their chip designs?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. You know, who's doing the most work here? Well, ARM is doing a design for a chip. They're not making the chip. They're not making the machine that makes the chip. They're not buying the machine that makes the chip. They're not assembling the chip along with a case and other parts like connectors and ports and things like that. They're not doing the vast majority of the work that goes into either the cell phone or the computer or the GPU. So they can't capture the majority of the value. They can really just capture value for what they do, and that's just the chip design. So that would be my answer to that. Yeah.
The ASML uses lithography essentially to imprint on the chips. They don't make the chips, but they sell the machines to basically the code or the imprintation on that the lithography imprints on these chips, and that's what they sell to actually the chip makers that make them, like Taiwan Semi. But ARM basically designs these chips that are utilized in our everyday life. I don't know if there's a lot of companies out there that we can say, oh, 99% of these chips are in something you utilize on an everyday basis. Starbucks has been hammered after their last earnings, and I can't say 99% of people drink Starbucks, but ARM IPO'd in 2023, and I admit this is something I missed the boat on. You and I both looked at this. Well, I looked at this. We both talked about this. We talked about buying it as an IPO. Um, and yeah, what are your feelings on where ARM is now?
Sort of, they went public in 2023 because technically they were public earlier. So there's been a lot of drama with like their status as a company. They were publicly traded for a long time. Then SoftBank bought them out and took them private. And now SoftBank last year has taken them public once again, but sort of. So they decided to put 10% of the overall shares of the company up for public trading. So this is the biggest criticism of ARM as a stock, is that only 10% of the overall shares are available to the public to buy and sell, which means it has.
Yeah, I mean, as a company, so one of the ways that as a company you can generate income, or really as a business, essentially, and just for listeners, is something basic. The only way you can necessarily, I want to say income, but get money or basically get capital is either through investors or a loan. That is it. You can use your revenue and keep cash and then use that to grow or build your business. But you can either get investors or you can get a loan. The other way a company can do it is they can IPO and trade on the public market and offer shares so that investors can purchase those shares. And the shares that they buy are, you're not buying an actual amount of you are buying an actual amount of the company. However, you're not buying what it's worth. You're not buying, for example, the $1,000 of NVIDIA you're purchasing is not $1,000 of NVIDIA. It's $1,000 of NVIDIA on the open market. And so ARM has a way to basically generate a lot of cash if they were to offer more of their shares, although that's not always looked at favorably. Because if you
Yeah, so SoftBank technically owns 90% of ARM shares. I would say if you own $1,000, this is a tricky situation. I would say if you own $1,000 of Nvidia, you do own $1,000 of Nvidia. The point where it becomes a problem is where companies are doing two of the things you said. So
let's go with current facts, though. Hold on. I gotta. So if you buy $1,000 of a share of Nvidia, you're saying you own $1,000 of the company Nvidia.
yeah, I mean, it depends on. So, first of all, you talked about a company can raise money through investors or loans. Those are pretty much the two ways, or from their own cash flow. But let's just throw away their own cash flow and say they can get money from either investors or loans. Now, the issue that's confounding here is private versus public investors. And it becomes a problem when you have a company like, for example, SMCI. So SMCI has taken their shares public, but then they're also doing loans. Now, when they do loans, they have to issue more shares. So they're actually diluting out their current shareholders. So $1,000 in SMCI might not be $1,000 in SMCI if they issue more shares. That's when it becomes a problem. But if the amount of shares is fixed, then technically $1,000 is $1,000. Now, the problem with ARM is that if the 90% that's being held privately all of a sudden gets thrown out to the public, that's a massive new amount of shares that's coming available to the public, and that could lead to a decrease in their share price. So what's held privately and what's held publicly is a confounding thing, and then whether or not they issue more shares is a confounding thing. But technically, $1,000 in Nvidia or any of these other abbreviations that we've talked about is still $1,000 of the company technically.
On the market. On the market. We'll have our listeners weigh in. Please comment, fact check us always on the things we say. One of the things you can look up is the share book value. So you can actually take the assets divided by the number of shares and figure out how much of the company you're buying. And that's what that's the amount of the company you're actually buying. What it's trading on the open market is there's a ratio. It's the share book value ratio, or you can look that up. Basically, you want to just see growth. But getting back to ARM, let's get back to ARM in general. The things that ARM does really, really well is they have good designs. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in 99% of phones and 99% of computers. The other thing is they really generate a lot of revenue from licensing. So at least that business model is pretty good. Um, I like to sort of compare. Why don't you think? And I asked this question a little bit. The growth of ARM isn't like the growth of NVIDIA. I mean, NVIDIA is growing substantially. I think it's one of the big positives of NVIDIA. ARM is growing, but not like NVIDIA is growing. Is that just the AI build out aspect of this?
Well, so ARM, like a lot of other tech companies, have different segments. For NVIDIA, they pretty much have one segment. Okay, yeah, they have gaming, they have this and that, but NVIDIA pretty much makes GPUs, and GPUs are in extreme demand right now. Well, ARM doesn't just do designs for GPUs. Actually, data center is a smaller part of their overall business. Smartphones is the biggest part. Are smartphones growing drastically? Well, they're growing, but not drastically. We know that actually the iPhone is pretty much steady with its growth. So we don't have massive iPhone sales growth right now. So yeah, so the designs that they're doing and also their licensing and the overall revenues they make through each phone that's produced and sold isn't necessarily growing as much as like the GPU market. So they also do automotive chips and they're seeing some growth in automotive, but they have multiple segments, not to mention China is 20% of their revenue. So, and we know China's had a pullback. So, yeah, so they just have more segments that make up their overall business, whereas NVIDIA is just making money from GPUs and software for GPUs and things like that, and service for GPUs, whatever. So, NVIDIA is more focused on just like the AI rollout, whereas ARM has some other segments that aren't boosting along with the AI rollout.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, NVIDIA previously, I invested in ARM or made a trade on ARM previously when we had the run prior to the last pullback. NVIDIA was at the 1,000 and level, and I just didn't want to chase NVIDIA. I took some profits, and I did some more informational trading, and I actually went with ARM and made a pretty good profit off of doing that. Took my profits. I don't own currently any shares of ARM. but it may be something to look at in regards to some of these. If you're trying to invest in the design aspect of either AI or chip makers, and understanding the basics in that and what a company does. So, what are the risks in ARM? Where are we going? What would you say the biggest negative or risk is when you invest in a company like ARM, other than just the overall market, because it's a solid company and its numbers? Just again, $3 billion of revenue, good net income, good cash. They have a really good asset to liability ratio. They do spend about $1 billion on research and development, but like you alluded to, you almost have to when you're trying to design new chips that are utilized in everyday life. You've got to do the research. You got to do the research and development. So great numbers as a company, good growth. What are the negatives?
Yeah, the negatives are a couple things we've already discussed, and maybe one thing that we haven't. So their valuation, their forward P is like around 70, around 80. So yeah, I mean, we would need to see continued earnings growth for them to grow into that P. That's one big thing. The float is actually most people's biggest concern. So, by the way, just to return to the float issue, their 10% float is pretty much unmatched. We have a company like Google or Microsoft, which has like what 99% float, 98% float. So almost all the shares for that company are publicly traded for Microsoft or Google. We have a newer company like Robinhood, which is still maybe 70% float, an even newer company like Instacart, Maple Bear, and their float is still above 40%, if I remember correctly. So these it's just unheard of to have so few shares of a company on the public market versus the private market, and if SoftBank wanted to sell more shares, that's going to affect the price on the public market. So that's the biggest risk for most people. China is the other thing. So there was some drama there in 2017. SoftBank broke off ARM China because they were concerned about regulation, US regulators trying to put sanctions on China and things like that. So they broke off their China segment into a separate majority Chinese owned business, and then
That's a considerable market for them, right? It's 20 to 30%, I think, right?
yeah, so 20% of their overall revenue. Now the issue is that they had trouble with the person they constructed as CEO for the ARM China segment. They tried to fire that person twice, but he wouldn't leave. Eventually they were able to get rid of that individual, but some of the employees of ARM China wound up leaving and making their own chip company. Obviously, well, I don't want to say obviously, but I'm supposing that they're stealing IP from ARM China to make their own chip company. It's supported by the Chinese government, Shenzhen government. So there are some issues there, but China's like always an issue. I don't know if you've noticed this is a recurring theme in pretty much every stock that we look at, every AI stock. China comes up in almost every like almost every discussion. China is there somehow. So those are the three things I would say: float, China, and then valuation are the three risks. And they're all serious risks.
Well, China's a major world power economically and militarily in the
Yeah.
world right now, and so obviously it's going to come up in regards to markets. Competition, a big negative. I mean, you mentioned that earlier.
No, not a big negative.
Yeah,
Nope.
I mean, I include this as a negative because Nvidia, I believe, doesn't have. I think Nvidia is far and ahead of all of its competitors. It's hard for me to judge how far ARM is ahead of its competitors. I think of ARM sort of as being, I don't want to say left behind, although NVIDIA, the amount of growth NVIDIA displays and some of the things NVIDIA does as far as a design maker. I mean, you're talking the past PE was like 50s and 70s. And so ARM is a little overvalued to me right now. Even after NVIDIA earnings. I mean, NVIDIA has a stock split coming up. NVIDIA is showing consistent growth. I don't think that the steam train that is NVIDIA is slowing down. The numbers of NVIDIA are gigantic compared to ARM. And so if you're asking me right now, hey, Kai, invest in ARM, invest in NVIDIA, you have $1,000, I'll take my $1,000 and put it all in NVIDIA right now,
Yeah,
even
I
after
don't
earnings.
disagree. I don't disagree
No,
with that. Really, in the end, what you're looking for is a percent gain on your invested money. So it doesn't matter if the company is making a lot or a little. What you want is a percent gain on every dollar that you put into a stock. And that percent gain can come from a small company or a large company. But there's just so much more risks with the smaller company. With a company like this, where the float is so small and the valuation is so high, it is way more risky than NVIDIA, in my
right.
opinion. So, no, I agree with you 100%.
Holy moly. On this podcast, I want to say to our listeners out there, James and I hardly agree in real life on a lot of things, but in this podcast, it's like we agree on everything. It's just unbelievable. Maybe it's where the research leads us to the same conclusions, which is one of the things I like about investing is the numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. They truly don't. I don't think ARM is a bad investment. I think ARM is going to be around in 5 years. But if you're asking me to choose between ARM and NVIDIA with $1,000, James and I are both taking your $1,000 and putting on NVIDIA. So let's talk about this just in regards to GPUs, ARM, chip makers, cell phones. I mean, the world is changing. Chat GPT 4 point, what was it, a
They're calling
4.0?
it 4.0. I'm not a big fan of the new name.
Like, why don't you just go up in numbers? Or just like, I like the Elon Musk, like Delta, Tesla. I mean, why go up 4 point? It makes no sense. I mean, 4.5, 4.2. Although Chat GPT now, give me a little bit on that in regards to competition, Microsoft, Chat GPT, OpenAI, and then Google. I mean, gosh, I wish I would have bought Google on the downtrend. I actually bought Apple. I did not buy Google when it dropped. Google tanked like a rock down to 130. It's rebounded quite well. But Gemini, I mean, so what's your take on that?
Before I mention Google, let me just say Chat GPT, OpenAI obviously makes Chat GPT. They have released a new app. And in addition to their new model, which you've been using and you like it a lot, which you know already that I use Chat GPT over 100 times a day. I'm just fully integrated. My entire life is fully integrated with Chat GPT. So they have a new Mac app now, so I can integrate even more deeply. And you pretty much hit one button on your Mac and a little bar pops up. It doesn't include your view of your other apps. A little bar pops up and you can type in whatever you want to type in, or you can ask it to look at your screen. And it's even easier to use ChatGPT. So it used to be on iPhone, I would use the app on the iPhone all the time. Now there's an app on Mac, which makes it even easier to use. So what I would say is for people who are thinking, oh, Apple's going to introduce Siri Plus, Siri AI, and that's going to be the big thing. Well, guess what? ChatGPT already is Siri Plus almost. I mean, you can have it do answer any question, give you any info, guide you, teach you whatever on an iPhone conveniently in that app or on a Mac conveniently in that app. The thing it can't do is access other apps, like read your text messages. We need Apple to be able to do that. So
I need to be able to say, hey, ChatGPT, what do I get James for Christmas? And it knows you based on our conversations, and then it can predict a Christmas present for you. That's what I need.
Apple is not going to give it permission to access all your text messages and stuff like that, but Apple could do that. So that's why I'm almost positive at this point that Apple is going to partner with OpenAI. I think that's what they're going to do because they just don't, in my opinion, they don't have the resources, they don't have the GPUs. I know we agree that they have a good team. They have put out some smaller models as open source, but they just don't have the team that OpenAI has. They don't have the amount of GPUs that OpenAI has access to. So they're going to have to license from OpenAI, and that might be a good thing if they do that. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a bad thing because look at what's going on with Google comparatively.
Yeah. So what went on with Google? What went on with
Let's
Google?
talk about that. So I'm going to share. You're going to love this. I'm going to share. You're going to love this. This is brand new, by the way. Over the last 48 hours, I'm going to just play a quick part of this video. And by the way, this is from Matt Wolf, Mr. eFlow, one of my favorite AI content creators. And I'm just going to play a little piece of a video that he did showing the problem that we have with Google's new integrated AI search. So a lot of people have been trying to pressure Google to do more AI and integrate it into search. Well, let's just look at the result of what has happened now that they've done that.
Somebody put the search term cheese not sticking to pizza into Google search. They got this response. You can add about 1/8 cup of non-toxic glue to the sauce to give it more tackiness. So Google search recommended putting glue in your pizza to keep the cheese from sliding off. How long ago was 1919? Google's AI said 1919 was 20 years ago. That doesn't sound right. Somebody typed smoking while pregnant, and Google came back, doctors recommend smoking 2 to 3 cigarettes per day during pregnancy. That's a recommendation I have never heard before. Here's another one. Is it okay to leave a dog in a hot car? Yes, it's always safe to leave a dog in a hot car, especially on a warm day. The temperature inside a car remains around the same temperature as outside the car. How does Sandy die in SpongeBob? Sandy Cheeks died by suicide on July 14th. 2 days before her body was found. The Johannes Police Department incident report states that Sandy was found unconscious with cuts on her arms and shoulders and cocaine nearby. An autopsy found that Sandy had cocaine toxicity, lethal levels of alcohol in her bloodstream, and a significant amount of heroin. You know, I missed that episode of SpongeBob, but honestly, I kind of want to see it now. Somebody said, how many sisters do I have right now? You can count the numbers of sisters you have by asking someone to write down the number of brothers they have, and then multiply that number by 2. Next, add 3 to the result, multiply that number by 5, and add the number of sisters they have. Finally, multiply that number by 10.
It goes on. I'm going to stop sharing, but it goes on and on. You can calculate the number of sisters you have by adding up the number of brothers and multiplying by 2. Look, so this is just coming out. This is going to be the controversy for next week. So Google shares, in my opinion, should be down on this. It's just as bad as like the black Nazi thing that they did. Dude, it's bad. So the issue is like they are not competent. They have proven time and time again they cannot do AI as good as Anthropic and OpenAI, which are these small little startups. So this massive company that technically invented the technology that OpenAI and Anthropic are using cannot produce AI products and services that are as good as OpenAI and Anthropic's products and services. So this is a problem. Maybe I don't want to say it's on purpose. If I want to come up with a crazy theory, I would say they're sabotaging themselves because they know if they do produce good AI, it'll hurt their search business. And selling ads and searches is essentially how they make all their money. So they might be helping their bottom line by doing a bad job at AI, but it does look horrific. It looks absolutely ridiculous. And you're going to see this next week. You're going to hear this talked about next week because Matt Wolf catches it first.
I would love to just go over different theories of why this is the case. I mean, I think Google potentially, and some of the things that have gone down in the Gemini release, and clearly is missing the boat. I mean, they're clearly missing the boat. They're not doing something right. I don't know if that's their algorithm or what is going on, but they're not doing something right. And I could postulate and we could talk, maybe we'll do an episode on theories. And the reason why I want our listeners to know theories is because I don't want to pretend to know for sure why this is the case. I don't have any inner workings at Google. I don't know anything about the algorithms that create these sort of open AI or AI models, but something's wrong on that. And so, yeah, Google's going to be in the news this week. Market opens tomorrow. One of the things James and I both like to talk about is also crypto, which is also in the market this week. There's a lot of news on crypto. We're having a crazy year, James. Crazy year. These are really cool times. So yeah, give a little bit of background on crypto. This wets your whistle, so to speak.
Yeah, this is a good one to end on. This is a really good one to end on. So a little background here. Crypto crashed pretty bad last year, along with other things. So overall, the bear market that we have emerged from at the end of 2023, crypto was deep in that bear market. The bear consumed crypto in a pretty bad way. And the Democratic Party seemed to think that crypto was done. Crypto was gone, over with, and they could jump on it with their full might and use it as an example of how they have trampled out corruption and scamming and money to North Korea. So they were pretty much trumpeting their ability to kill crypto. Well, just so happens crypto didn't die. Bitcoin is way back up. Bitcoin ETFs had to be approved because of a legal case that the crypto industry won. And here's where I think the tides changed, because this last week, massive change in the tides of how the Democratic Party looks at crypto. We had not one, not two, but 3 bills that passed the House of Representatives. One of them was already confirmed in the Senate, and the other 2 probably will be. Biden has come out and said he's not going to veto these bills, even though initially he said he would. And we had an Ethereum ETF approved. So here's why I think we've had a massive turn in the tide. 2 things. First of all, Trump came out a little over a week ago and was saying that he's a candidate of crypto. He's going to support crypto. He's going to support the crypto industry. As long as it's okay and not a scam, he's okay with it. That's what he came out and said. And here's what I think is the bigger thing. I think the Democrats just realized the scope of what they're up against. Mike Novogratz and another crypto influencer earlier in May, and I think this is what turned the tide. They came out and they started talking about the real number of people in America who own crypto in one way, because the government was trying to say it was like 10 million people. They came out and said, no, it's not 10 million people, it's 85 million people. 65 million people in America own a dog, 85 million people in America own crypto. So more people in America own crypto than own a dog. Now, the Democratic Party hears that, they're going to freak out. And here's the last thing I'll say about this. Crypto industry is now the third largest PAC, the third largest political action committee. So we're talking the two main PACs, which are the Democratic and Republican PAC, spend and raise about 100 million every big election cycle. Well, guess what? The crypto PAC, number three, collectively, they're now over $70 million. And they are drastically influencing specific elections for candidates. So what I would say is it's a matter of survival for Democratic politicians, especially the president, to now be easier on crypto. I'm not saying they're endorsing it, but they have to ease up for their own survival.
The president's eating ice cream. He doesn't care about crypto. But what they do care about is the poll numbers, the amount of Americans that own crypto. And honestly, this isn't it. There can't be and this is why I don't like politicians, because they're going to be swayed based on polling data and unpopular opinions. And the goal of a politician, is just to get elected again, not to necessarily do what's right for their constituents. And so, yeah, I won't even say what my political leanings are in regards to what I think of crypto, or whether I'm opposed or against ETF. I will say I think crypto is a great thing. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I think the government should stay out of it. I think there's probably a small amount of regulation that needs to be figured out in regards to, for example, taxation. However, universally, this is just sort of it's not worth the fight. It's not worth coming out on the other side of the aisle in regards to the opinion. So I think you're right. I think they may have actually seen polling data on it and said, hey, do we really care that much? Because they were pretty, I mean, I think it was back when Trump was president, or they were pretty opinionated on this matter. Back when COVID, it was sort of like during COVID, they were pretty opinionated on this. And so, yeah, interesting time for crypto. I think, what is Bitcoin? Is it in the 60,000 still? Is Bitcoin 65, 66? What is?
Yeah, and I don't think the change in the political tides here is yet factored in to all the prices, because we dropped as low as 58, 59 when we had this little downturn over the past few weeks. But of course, now it's back up to 69,000 with all this news. I still don't think that this turning in the political tides is factored into the overall market cap of crypto right now. We haven't even hit an all-time high yet in the market cap of crypto.
Are we going to get to 100,000 before July, James?
Well, obviously, you and I have a bet, but I think the bet was August, not July. So if you're going to change the terms of the bet, that would invalidate the bet. But,
I'll give you August 30th. We'll go August 30th on that.
Well, I had a conservative target. 100K is conservative. I'm not saying it's going to a million or anything like that. Yeah, I do think we could still go to 100K this year. I don't know about August, but I think we could go to 100K. A lot of people think we could go to 100K on Bitcoin this year.
I usually lose bets to James a lot. So if I win this one, it'll be a small victory. But yeah, ASML last week, ARM this week. We've had NVIDIA earnings. The last week we talked about Palantir and JFrog. So yeah, please tune in. Next week we'll come up with a new topic, but lots in the news. I'm looking forward to this week. Are we going up or down tomorrow? What do you think?
It's hard to say. I would say it's going to be potentially a good week. I don't see any reason for a catastrophic week.
Yeah, and circling back, last thing, look and see what the world markets are doing, especially on sort of non-world holidays. For example, like New Year's Eve, New Year's, those are basically world holidays. But something like Memorial Day, you can get a sense of what the rest of the world is doing in regards to Monday or Tuesday trading. So
I personally think the rest of the world is looking at our markets to make their decision. But anyway, so thanks for listening to our show. Please give us a rating and review, or on YouTube, a like or a comment. And we'll be back in the next episode to cover more AI stocks. So you can find all our holdings and trades at investingintel.ai. Thanks so much, Kai.
Thanks, James. See ya.